Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. My name is Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and on behalf of Arika Resources, ASX ticker ARI, I'd like to welcome you to today's investor and shareholder webinar. Well, the Leonora-Laverton district in WA is widely recognised as one of the country's most prolific gold mining regions, home to multi-million ounce deposits, world-class mines, and of course the cornerstone operations of ASX mid-tier leader Genesis Minerals. This area remains a prime destination for emerging explorers, and over the past couple of years, Arika Resources has joined the ranks of companies to watch in this highly prospective gold district, with ownership of two standout gold projects, Yundamindra and Kookynie. Both projects have been significantly underexplored for decades, yet they offer substantial upside, particularly with the application of modern systematic exploration techniques. Following a recently upsized $5 million capital raise, Arika is gearing up for a major 10,000 metre drilling campaign, which is set to begin in the coming weeks. To share more on this exciting next phase, we're very pleased to be joined this morning by Arika's Managing Director, Justin Barton. Just a reminder to everyone who's tuned in that following Justin's presentation, we'll open the floor for questions. This is meant to be an interactive session, and Justin would welcome your questions. So please use the online Q&A tab that's on the right-hand side of your browser to submit your questions, and I'll make sure that we put all of them to Justin following today's session. Well, Justin, good morning, welcome. Congrats on the recent capital raise. It's an exciting time for Arika, so please walk us through it.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, Reid Corporate, for hosting this webinar, and welcome to everyone online. Really excited to share where we are and where we're going. I think we're at we've done a lot of hard work over the last couple of years to get this company where it is, and I think the next 6 to 12 months is really shaping up to be a really exciting and hopefully game-changing phase for the company. So I'll just slowly walk through where we are and who we are, and sort of work towards what we're looking to do in the coming months. So firstly, as Nicholas reached out and touched on, we've got two really exciting prospects in the Leonora-Laverton area, really well-known, well-endowed gold district. The two projects we've got, Kookynie and Yundamindra. Yundamindra at the moment has been the focus, but we're looking to bring both these projects along at the same time. So we're really starting to ramp up exploration on both these projects because we think they're both equally as exciting. So over the two projects, we've got about 180 square kilometres of tenure. These projects, what sort of attracted us to these projects, obviously the location, and we'll touch on these a little bit closer as we zoom in. But obviously the location of the projects, they've both got significant historical production, mainly back in the early 1900s, significant high grade, but there's been limited and no modern exploration, and these projects have essentially been unloved for many years. And in the case of Yundamindra, there's essentially been no exploration for over 20 years, which is a really exciting opportunity for us. On the back of a very successful capital raise last week, which we upscaled to a $5 million capital raise, has now given us the funding to really explore and test this and hopefully unlock the significant value that we think lies in both of these projects. So just a bit of a quick corporate snapshot. Our share price at the moment is sitting around 2.8 cents. About 780 million shares on issue. So we've got a market cap of around $22 million with around $4 million in the bank at the moment, and then we've got tranche 2 of our placements. We'll then bring in another bit over $1 million. So we'll be over $5 million, well over $5 million in the bank, and so we think we're really well placed now to push this company forward. We've got a really strong corporate team, led by Roger Stein-Price, myself, and Stephen Woods. And the most exciting part for us over the last 6 months has been the appointment of Steve Valance, our General Manager of Exploration, highly experienced, highly respected geologist, and he's brought on another very experienced full-time technical geologist who's managing the Kookynie project. So we've got two really experienced geologists that are really transforming what we're doing with these companies, with these projects. So if I jump to the Yundamindra project, which has been the focus of the attention over the last sort of 12 months, we only got hold of this tenure 12 months ago. It was when we farmed into these projects 5 years ago. This project was under plaint, had no exploration, and it actually only came out of plaint in February last year. So we've only really had 12 months of work on this, and probably even less than that, given the time to get up and start to drilling on it. So Yundamindra, as you can see, it's in elephant country, and we're hunting elephants. You can see around us, we've got Genesis, Wallaby, Granny Smith operations. These are multi-million ounce mines all around us. Northern Stars to the south. So we're in a fantastic location where we're hoping to be the next significant discovery. No one's explored on this tenure for over 20 years. There's been no drilling on this for over 20 years, and there's been no modern exploration. So we're really a first mover on this project in this area. The exciting thing that gets everyone interested is most of this tenure is actually on mining leases. So if we wanted to, we could actually monetize this really quickly. That's not our strategy at the moment. We're really only just scratching the surface of what we think is potentially here, and that's where we think there's real significant upside for shareholders. As I touched on, significant historical production. You can see the high-grade historical production there, but most of that stopped around the 1930s, 1940s. So there's really been nothing done since that time. So the real opportunity here is potential for a new generation of discoveries and rapid growth of a couple of existing brownfield prospects. If we start to zoom in on the Yundamindra project, and you can see our tenure there, and the two projects that we've been working on are the Land at Last and Pennyweight Point projects. Just to the north of us, directly along strike, you can see there's a joint venture which was recently announced in December last year with Gold Roads and Iceni Gold. Now that was a $44 million joint venture. They've only really just started doing work on that, but it really, I think, highlights the value opportunity that sits in Arika Resources. We're only sort of a 22 million market cap at the moment, but we really think that we've actually got the real jewel in the crown in the tenure that we hold, and we're calling it the Yundamindra syncline. And there's actually a lot of really exciting geology happening down there, which is we think will lead hopefully significant discoveries. When we started first on this project, what had been historically drilled in the late 80s, early 90s by Sons of Gwalia, and it looked like it actually had a significant amount of drilling. But when we actually interrogated the data, 97% of the drilling was 50 metres and above. So there's actually been no exploration into the fresh rock below 50 metres depth. So that is a really exciting opportunity for us. It was largely all air core drilling done by Sons of Gwalia. And so once they hit fresh rock, they got blade refusal and the drilling stopped. But from those early results, there's actually some really significant grades and exciting grades, which obviously then led us to start drilling at Land at Last and Pennyweight Point, where they had focused their drill attention. So we think there's a really exciting opportunity here at this project, and that's what led us to these. Like I said, with Yundamindra, we only started exploration on this sort of a year ago today, and we've actually done and since Steve Valance has joined us in October last year, we've done a significant amount of background work, and we're still continuing that to move forward. And this is really important. It's probably not the really exciting stuff that the market is looking for. They're looking for drill results and significant intercepts, which we've been delivering. But this fundamental work with core geophysics and substance geoscience is really important. And what it actually highlights, as you can see from the image on the right hand side, is we've identified all these structures, and you can see my yellow cursor, but there's all these parallel structures, and Pennyweight Point, which sits up here, and you can see how small that little prospect is at the moment. That sits on a 4.5 kilometre structure, of which we've only drilled 300 metres to date. But there's multiple parallel structures on the eastern side, and then on the western side, you can see there's multiple parallel structures as well, and they extend for over 10 kilometres that we know of to date. So that's sort of been identified by core geophysics, and you can see the little red dots on there on that image. They're all the known historical prospects. So you can see that they line up really neatly with the structures identified by core geophysics, which was really exciting. They've identified another 25 plus high priority targets, and we've then done a lot of work with Social and Geoscience, who've done a lot of work on the historical soils, and they've identified another 27 targets. So what we're actually seeing is that there's a lot of smoke on this project. There's a lot of signs that this is a really significant mineralized system. And so we're now at the stage now to really start testing to see how big this system is. If we now focus in on what we call our eastern corridor, and that's where the Pennyweight Point prospect is. So Pennyweight Point at the moment is defined over approximately 350 odd metres to a depth of about 200 metres. Now, there's actually a significant mineralised zone there already, but the deposit's only limited by the amount of drilling we've done to date. So this prospect is actually open to the north, south, and at depth. And as I've shown in the coming images, you'll see where the real upside of this prospect lies. As I touched on, this sits on a 4.5 kilometre structure, and there are parallel structures. So we've only drilled 350 odd metres of this structure to date. So you can start to see that how this can really build into a significant deposit and discovery really quickly. It's a highly mineralised deposit, as you can see. Some of the intercepts, and if I flick over to the next slide, these are actually our drill results that we've undertaken in the last 9 months. And as you can see, really high grade, thick intersections, consistent thick intersections of 20 to 30 metres at 2 to 3 grams a tonne, which is really exciting. Probably the most exciting part of the work we've done here is the diamond core that we just completed. And you can see in the 2 red boxes there, the diamond cores are actually an extension to the mineralisation at depth. They extended mineralisation by about 50 odd metres down plunge. And what we hit was consistent, 35 metres, 24 metres at 2.5 grams a tonne, which is really exciting. And what it actually confirmed is that this thing hasn't been tested at depth, and that's where the real opportunity really lies. The other thing you'll probably notice by this image, and if I just get my cursor on it, is you can see, and I'll just circle all this area here, everything below that has not been drilled. And you see our last 2 intersections. So this is only, we're only talking 100 odd metres, 150 odd metres directly below, vertically below surface. So, the upside and the opportunity here is really exciting. And then you can see to the north and to the south that we just have not drilled anything. So the deposit's currently defined over 350 odd metres, but it's actually it's just limited by the amount of drilling we've done. So the work we're doing in this next program that's coming up is obviously looking to go and test that and really step out this drilling and see what we've actually got there. This image probably highlights the amount of work we've done and the opportunity that sits at Pennyweight Point. So Pennyweight Point, you see the blue area there, that's the limit of the drilling that we've completed, and that's where our 350 odd metre strike is. As you can see in this image, and this is a combination of the geophysics and the geochemistry that's been completed, all these pink, red areas are highly anomalous gold from the soils, and you can see the underlying structures sitting on top of those. What it's really highlighting is there's really good signs that the mineralisation extends for a significant length to the north and to the south, and also sort of east and west of Pennyweight Point on these structures, because as you can see, there's multiple structures. So these just haven't been tested, but there's a lot of really exciting signs there that mineralisation continues. So we're, as part of the structure, a part of our program that's coming up, which will start in a couple of weeks, we'll continue to step out Pennyweight Point to the north and south and at depth, and then we'll start to really start honing in on some of these new priority targets. And that's some of the work we're doing now while we're waiting for the drill rig to come. We're actually doing a lot more work to really start to define, so we ensure that when we do drill, we're actually giving the company the best chance to hit some new discoveries. If I then move over to the Western Corridor, now the Western Corridor is essentially, you can see here, we're calling the Yellow Brick Road, is a 16-kilometre corridor. Of that though, and you can see Land at Last, and that's where our focus has been initially on this Western Corridor. But between sort of Land at Last and down to Emu, it's approximately 10 kilometres of mineralised structure. And we know that because all these historical prospects we can see through there. So we know that's a really, potentially gold-rich structure, but just hasn't been tested with any modern exploration. So there's some really exciting brownfields exploration opportunities there. We've just started at Land at Last, but you can see, the extent that we haven't actually tested to date on this Western Corridor. If I just zone in on Land at Last, and that's sort of the only part we've focused on initially, you can see some of the really exciting results that we've returned at Land at Last. The Land at Last structure actually runs, this is the Land at Last structure coming down through here. So that's defined over about 800 odd metres already to a depth of about 180 metres, which is actually at around about 2 grams a tonne, which is a really significant deposit already. There's really significant ounces in the ground there already, just from the limited amount of work we've done. What we've actually noticed, and this is across the east and western side of the tenure, is that we've got these, like Land at Last, we've got these structures running for 10 kilometres sort of from the northwest down to the southeast, but there's multiple cross-cutting structures. And you can see here, we've got the F1 fault. There's actually multiple cross-cutting structures all across the tenure. What we're actually starting to find, and as you can see in this F1, is that these cross-cutting structures are highly mineralised as well. But once again, they've had limited to no exploration. So you can see our diamond core, we put 1 diamond core into Land at Last. This was the deepest hole ever drilled on this western line. Now the whole Western Corridor hasn't been drilled below 80 metres, or essentially 50 metres. So there's real exciting opportunity at depth, and obviously where anything's undercover, for significant new discoveries. This image probably really highlights this, and this is the actual F1 faults. This is that cross-cutting structure. The main Land at Last lode is this image here. But what you can see, and you can see this, the historical drilling at the top here is that's all the historical drilling that's been done at this project. And it's all limited to sort of 50 metres and above. Everything sort of below that, and you can see all these blue boxes here with our intersections, they're all our Arika's drilling that we've just completed in December and in May last year. Once again, we've only drilled to about 80 odd metres, particularly on this F1 fault, and our deepest hole, which was our last hole, which was a diamond hole, we hit 15 metres at 3 grams a tonne. So that's really exciting. What we actually saw from that, albeit it is limited by only sort of a couple of holes, but it appears to be thickening at depth as we're chasing this thing at source. So that's really exciting, but once again, it is limited data at this point, but that's a really encouraging sign. If I then step out, as I've mentioned earlier, we've only focused at Land at Last to the northern end of the Western Corridor, and we've got a number of significant brownfields opportunities extending for 10 kilometres to the south. But then there's also a number of high priority targets which have been identified from our geophysics and geochem. And this is probably where a lot of real technical people are getting quite excited, particularly when you come what we call the nose of the our Yundamindra tenure, where effectively the eastern and western structures converge, and that's where we're actually really seeing potentially an opening up in the geology, and where you expect to see significant fluid flow, and where we, as a starting point, it'd be the first point you'd go to look for significant gold. This area hasn't been explored at all. We've identified through the geochem and geophysics that there's some significant signs of gold mineralization in this southern nose. We went out there and we just did a bit of a field check. We identified over 4.5 kilometres of outcropping quartz reef with significant alluvial workings either side of this. We then did some rock chips on that. It came back highly anomalous for gold along that whole quartz reef. We've since gone back and done infill rock chipping, and we're waiting on those results. And that's just to help refine targeting of drilling, so upcoming drilling program. So this will also be one of the key areas that we focus on in our upcoming program. Initially, we'll start at Pennyweight Point and land at last, because obviously at the moment, they're the significant deposits, and that's where the main fire is, and we'll continue to step out and build on those resources. But as we continue drilling, and we're looking to have a drill rig sort of going non-stop for the next 12 months, at least one for starters, we may increase that as we push forward. But the drill rig will go from Pennyweight Point to land at last. As we interpret those results and get those results, we'll then move the rig and start testing some of these new high priority targets. So we've actually just got hold of a new rig with the upscaled capital raise we did. We also increased our drilling program. So we'll start with RC at Pennyweight Point and land at last, and continue to build along strike and at depth. And then we'll flip the rig to an air core, which will then start testing some of these high priority targets. And this image and what it shows, and you can see Sunrise Dam over here in Wallaby, these significant projects. But you can see the real exciting structure that's happening at Yundamindra. We've got an eastern corridor, the western corridor, and then things sort of converge here at what we're calling the nose of the syncline, which hasn't been tested. What we're actually seeing is we've got two pretty significant deposits already in Pennyweight Point and land at last, but we've tested less than 1% of this, and we're seeing a lot of smoke in the rest of the prospect. It is early stage exploration, and we know that with exploration there is risk, but the signs there and the work we're doing in the background before we start drilling is really starting to show that this looks like to be a really significant mineralized system, and you can see the potential scale that this can present. We hit those two projects, we've probably got significant ounces in them already, but with the rest of the project, you can see how this could be, this could be real genuine scale potential at this project. And that's where the exciting opportunity lies for us in the coming drill program. If I then flip over to our Kookynie gold project, our Kookynie gold project is probably 12 months behind Yundamindra. We've just started, we've just completed a 4-month independent review of the whole Kookynie tenure. We've completed soils programs at 3 of the prospects, which we expect those soils back shortly. But Kookynie is probably a little bit of a forgotten project in our portfolio, but it's equally as exciting. It shares a lot of the same traits as Yundamindra. Significant historical production, significantly underexplored or unexplored, and there's real upside for shareholders and investors in as we work through this and hopefully start to target some of these new discoveries. So the areas that we've done soils on what we call Ithaca, Wandin, and Mulga Plum. The reason we started off with those, firstly Ithaca, and Ithaca is probably an exciting piece on its own. Ithaca sits up here and it's directly along strike from Genesis's Orient Well. So that strike runs straight through our tenure, just hasn't had any exploration. There's signs of, once again, significant signs of historical workings on there, but it's just had no modern exploration and no drilling done. So we've just completed a soils program on that. That will then help guide and define drill targeting for this upcoming drill program. Similarly with Wandin and Mulga Plum, these areas, and you can see there's no signs of, limited signs of historical workings on there. when we're out there, there are some signs out there, but we've actually seen prospectors picking up significant gold. The reason this hasn't had any modern exploration is obviously the old timers and where all these historical prospects all sit. Old timers are obviously chasing what was outcropping. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, whatever was outcropping, they could see, they could chase, and that's where they went after. Wandin, Mulga Plum, and Ithaca, these are generally undercover, albeit there's not a huge amount of cover there. But because they're not outcropping, when people have gone back drilling, they've gone back to where the old timers were, because that's the obvious place to start. But no one's really put any modern exploration into these undercover areas. When we've done geophysics and now we're doing the geosoils, we're starting to see things really starting to light up in these areas. So we see there's significant, potential upside in these projects, and that's where we started. The other really exciting parts of Kookynie is obviously the McTavish, Leopold, and Champion, which also had historical production, and the old Cosmopolitan gold mine, which was at the time in the early 1900s was the most profitable gold mine in Australia, and that produced over 330,000 ounces at about 15 grams a tonne. That just has not had any exploration. No one's gone back and looked at it. So we're actually just appointed someone to actually start to pull this apart and really start to explore the potential and what might still be sitting at Cosmopolitan. And there's the old Altona operation as well, which is a parallel lode to Cosmopolitan. Once again, it's had no modern exploration and has remained essentially untouched for the last 40, 50 years. So once again, this is another highly prospective area. We're surrounded by, you can see Genesis in the blue, we've got Saturn over here in the right. We hold a significant amount of tenure in this area. And Carnival, who sit just in this green area to our right, they actually had a significant discovery undercover, and it just sort of highlighted, the potential of these projects that no one actually really done any work. They were sort of the first to start to test undercover. That was actually just a long strike from our prospects, and they hit a significant discovery undercover. So that sort of showed to us that the real potential of this project. So where do we go now? So we spent a lot of work doing the fundamentals, getting the geochem, getting the geophysics done, identifying all the historical workings, working through all the historical drilling databases to get as much information as we can to then target where we're going to focus our drilling. So in the next program, and I know the next 6 to 12 months, firstly, we're going to be focused on extending the Pennyweight Point and Land at Last prospects. They remain open along strike and at depth, and so we'll continue to keep stepping out and chasing that. And then in between those programs, we'll then start to target some of these new discoveries at Yundamindra, and then we'll start moving down to Kookynie and start testing some of the high priority targets down there. So we're looking to really bring these two projects along at the same time. We're looking like having at least one drill rig going non-stop for the next 6 to 12 months. That may increase, and we'll be bringing in diamond drilling as we need to as well to help define targets. But we're expecting a really consistent news flow, for the next 12 months as we drill, we get assay results back. We continue our ongoing aromatics work that we're doing at Yundamindra. We've got soils, so we've got a lot of activity happening. So we're going to looking to have a constant flow of news. And the real exciting part for us is we've done all that hard work. So it's drill results, and and we hope and we think that this is part of a really big system. And we're at the exciting part now of drill testing, and that's where we're at the company, is really drilling these opportunities out. So that's sort of where we are. As Nicholas said at the start, we've got a drill rig which will be on site. We'll start drilling in the next couple of weeks. It was delayed slightly, but it gave us an opportunity to actually change the rig, because we actually thought having a dual purpose rig that could do RC and air core gave us more flexibility and could manage costs a lot better. But it's also now given us an extra couple of weeks to really do some more of this targeting work, to prioritise some of these new targets and where we want to drill at Pennyweight Point and Land at Last, to really ensure that when we are doing our drilling, we're giving ourselves the best opportunity of hitting the mineralisation. So with that, I'd like to open it up to anyone for questions of what we're doing and where we're going.
Wow, thanks, Justin. What a great story. That's very impressive, and appreciate the presentation. Just a reminder to everyone who's tuned in, feel free to fire in your questions, use the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of the browser, and I'm sure Justin would welcome your questions. Justin, just to start, I mean, obviously a wealth of targets there. Do you have any idea how your 10,000 metres will sort of roughly be allocated across some of those prospects? I mean, you gave a broad sequence there: Pennyweight Point, Land at Last, and then testing some of the new areas. Have you sort of given any definition around that yet, or what you're thinking?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. It's the 10,000 metres. It's something that's 10,000 is probably the first phase of what we're doing. So the way that we're sort of planning at the moment is initially be around about 3,000 to 4,000 metres at Pennyweight Point, and 3,000 to 4,000 metres at Land at Last. And as we get in those results, we don't want to do too much drilling at each of the prospects. We want to get the results back, interpret, make sure we understand what's happening, help refine where we're drilling. So we think around about 3,000 metres, 3,000 to 4,000 metres is a really good starting point. While we're waiting on those results, we're then looking to do air core, and sort of the balance will be sort of 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 metres of air core at some of these priority targets. Those targets will obviously move, and the really exciting thing about this is at the moment Pennyweight Point and Land at Last are really showing to be a couple of significant deposits. But given what's happening, there's so much happening at Yundamindra, is in 6 to 12 months' time, it's highly possible that Land at Last and Pennyweight Point aren't the biggest fires at this project, and it's quite possible that there'll be 2 or 3 other areas that are got significantly more deposits. So we're really still at scratching the surface of understanding what's happening here. There's so much happening. There's so much smoke, but we've really got to find the main fire, and that's part of this air core testing, and why we really want to continue to start test these priority targets, because there is a lot happening here, and we think there's a significant source, and we're just trying to chase that source. So
thanks, Justin, and just probably leads into the next question. I mean, looking at those results you put up earlier at both those prospects, Pennyweight Point and Land at Last, some fantastic intercepts. I mean, it looks, I'm no geologist, but it looks to me like you could move pretty quickly into a resource drill out on both of those, pretty well straight away. So how do you go about, how do you think about that? I suppose strategically, you could, I suppose, move into the resource definition phase quite quickly, or do you think about it now more holistically in terms of looking for the big picture?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, because it's a question that a lot of people ask us, and there is so many targets and opportunities here, and people sort of ask Steve Balance, our technical exploration manager, they sort of say, well, there's so many targets, where do you start? What do you do? And do you define a resource at Land at Last and Pennyweight Point, and there probably is a significant resource there already, although we haven't done that work. Or do you go, targeting these new areas to find, where the biggest fire is? We're sort of taking the approach at the moment. It is early stage. We've drilled less than 1% of this. Land at Last, Pennyweight Point have had significant historical drilling, albeit limited to depth. There's probably enough drilling done there to be able to define something. We really want to step that out and sort of get a better idea of how the scale of these those 2 prospects. But there's significant other targets, and as I mentioned earlier, is that it's quite possible in 6 to 12 months, because there's been no modern exploration drilling done, particularly in that southern area of the Yundamindra syncline, is that one of those areas may be a more prospective area to drill. So our approach at the moment is to really start testing these and get a better understanding of where we think the real key mineralisation on this prospect sits. Obviously, we'll continue to expand Pennyweight Point and Land at Last. They are on mining leases, and all our historical prospects sit on mining leases, so we can potentially get a resource and monetize that, that's, it's always an option there. But our approach at the moment is really we think that this is part of potentially a really significant discovery, and we want to really try and, we're hoping to be the next multi-million ounce discovery, and we want to test that before we start, defining resources over any prospects.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Let's go to some of the online questions now. The first one from an investor: how long before you'll need to raise funds again? It's a good question. Very successful $5 million raise recently. What sort of runway does that give you based on your projected exploration programs?
Yeah, look, and this sort of goes hand in hand, because a lot of people sort of say, well, why don't you get 2, 3, 4 rigs, out there drilling as fast as you can? 3 or 4 is probably a bit much, but why don't you get 2 rigs out there at least going full time? Problem when you have 2 rigs going out there is, you've got a resource, and you've got to have sufficient time and expertise in-house to be able to, when those results come back, to interpret those results and make sure you're spending the time wisely and really understanding what's happening, so you're not wasting drill meters when you're drilling. So we've got one. We're planning to have 1 drill rig going for the next 12 months or more. With the cash we've got at the moment, that will really push us out. We go 6, possibly even go 12 months. Really depends on how much drilling we do and how much of that's sort of RC versus air core, and if we get a diamond drilling. And it's really going to be results driven and where we're targeting. But we've got sufficient cash flow now, funding now, to be able to drill significantly more than the 10,000 meters. So we can probably get 3, 4, maybe potentially even 5 really good programs in, to really start to get an understanding of this before we need to go back to the market to get some more funds. Obviously, the approach, and as with all companies, that we hope to get significant results, which will then obviously help force up the share price. We think as a market cap, we're significantly undervalued, and we sort of get that comment a lot given what we've already got sitting there. But that's the opportunity for investors, and where we see the opportunity. And so we're really focused now on making sure that when we do spend dollars, we're putting it in the ground. And this is why we're doing that work at the moment. That's probably not the market, exciting work. It's a real fundamental background work that's really going to help ensure that when we do drill, it's giving us the best opportunity of hitting mineralisation and expanding this project.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Next question here. Investor comments some impressive diamond drilling recently, which was, I think, the first on the project perhaps in recent times. Where is that core stored? Is it on site or in Perth?
So the core is actually on site at the moment. Also, it's actually in Kalgoorlie, because we just cut it and we're just going back, and we're going to bring it all back to site. We want to bring all our core back to site. It is the first diamond drilling done in over 20 years. There has been 4 historical diamond holes done at Pennyweight Point. There's been none done at Land at Last on the western side. Of those cores, there's actually one done by Sons of Gwalia, which was done in I believe in the late 90s. We've actually got hold of that core. Actually, Genesis had it in their core shed. We've managed to get that. We've brought it back to site. We'll then bring the recent core we've done from Kalgoorlie back to site as well, so that we've got it there. And it was really important that we got core early on in this, so we help Steve and the team understand what the goals associated with, and it really helps us with targeting our upcoming drill program. So Steve likes to get core really early. We've done that. As we start drilling out some of these new high priority targets, we may get the diamond in there to drill some of those as well to get a better understanding.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin. Next question, let's jump over to Kookynie. And the question is, can you please clarify if the prolific Cosmopolitan mine is on your leases or excised? And perhaps if you could just maybe remind people the significance of that project as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, Cosmopolitan there is a small lease that we don't own that sits on the Cosmopolitan mine. It actually sits at the top. So the main shaft, the Cosmopolitan mine, is not on our lease, but the shafts then decline at roughly about 45-degree angle And it's only a small postage stamp, so it's only sort of a couple of 100 metre by a couple of 100 metre tenure. And I'm not sure that's a significant historical. I'm not sure how that came about. But it's clear that the deposit actually is all, it has that depth, and all sort of heads straight into it's all on our tenure. So the top part of the Cosmopolitan gold mine is not on ours, but it's only down to about 50, 100 metres. I can't remember the exact thing, but the majority of it all sits on ours. And then where we see the upside, the top part of it's been significantly mined out in the early days. So obviously it was shallow and they could see it. So it's at depth. That's where the opportunity we think really lies. So there's significant upside there and just hasn't been explored. So Kookynie is really exciting, and we had an independent geo who's joined us full time. He just did a 4-month review, and we sort of said, "Well, look, what is your views on Kookynie?" He's, you can't contain his excitement of what he's seen at Kookynie. He's really excited to get into it. He's now pulling apart the Cosmopolitan gold mine, but he's seeing significant upside, and there's just so many opportunities there, and Cosmopolitan being one of them. But there's so many others. So we're really excited to really accelerate exploration at Kookynie to bring it up to speed with Yundamindra and bring these two projects along at the same time.
Thanks, Justin. Great. Some great questions coming in. So thanks to everyone who's tuned in here. Next one here is an investor says your historical drilling that is less than 50 metres. So there's very little deeper drilling on both these projects. What confidence do you have that this could extend and that the historical results are the result of a supergene effect?
Yeah, really good question. The historical models, there is a supergene, particularly over the pennyweight point. So the fresh rock, and you can probably see in one of my images earlier, and I'll try and go back to it. And if I go back to the pennyweight point, because it probably highlights there. So you can see at the top end, I'll just draw on here. You can see the weathered and profile stops. So this is all weather, and up here is the supergene, as the investor has mentioned. And below that, essentially all the drilling below that has been ours. Not all ours, but the majority of it is very limited drilling, because what Sons of Gwalia and Saracens predominantly did was RAB and air core. So they drilled this, and they drilled it in multiple different directions, and they hit fresh rock and they got blade refusal and it stopped. So there was some outstanding results in some of that air core drilling. There was one intersection of 8 metres at 56 grams a tonne, which obviously then led to us, well, why wouldn't we just start drilling there as a starting point? It was really exciting. So we've actually, when we first drilled at Pennyweight Point, we put our first holes into Pennyweight Point in August last year. We've done a follow-up program in December, January this year. But the first hole we did was really confirmation drilling, and it was going back. There was a little bit of twinning, but not much. We did a little bit of twinning, and we did a bit of a step out as well. But we really wanted to confirm other historic results, because they were 20 odd years ago. We wanted to confirm, are those results correct, accurate? How do they stand up? And what we actually found was, when we drilled, the results that we actually got back actually showed that our intersections came back actually slightly higher grade and slightly thicker intersections. Now that's probably technology and assaying and the like as well, which contributed to that. But that was really exciting. But what it actually did is it validated all that historical work. So what we actually see here at Pennyweight Point is that, yes, there is a supergene effect at the top, but no one's really chased the source of this in the fresh rock, and that's what we're doing. And what we're actually seeing is this, and this isn't probably the right image, but I'll quickly just go to the next image. But the mineralization dips to the southeast, and it dips at about 45 degrees. So it's sort of perfect for an open pit operation. You've got the supergene at the top, which obviously you process all that, but then the mineralization is dipping at a nice 45-degree angle to the southeast. So it's just conducive to an easy open pit startup operation if we can went down that path.
Fantastic, thanks, Justin. Next online question here is investor comments that mill constraints are a significant issue in the goldfields for juniors. What are your options regarding future milling once you define a resource?
Yeah, look, we're pushing for. Obviously, we're just trying to firstly understand how much we've got, and we think we're hopeful that we are the next multi-million ounce discovery. But obviously, a long way to go. It's only early stage. But there are a lot of mills in the area, and as you can see by this image, within 50 kilometres of us, you can see there's 6 mills. I can tell you now, Sunrise Dam is operating at less than 50% capacity, has been for a long time. Genesis has got Mount Morgan's up and going, and we know that Bright Star are actually processing ore from their second Fortune project, which actually sits just down here, and they're actually carting through our tenure up to Mount Morgan's. So they'll be looking for more feed as well. We know Granny Smith and Wallaby are sort of running under capacity as well. The exciting thing for us, if we wanted to go down that path, now at this point in time, we're probably looking just define a resource, and as a starting point, if we've got significant ounces, we'd probably look to maybe process it ourselves and build a mine, process it ourselves. But the reality is there's so many significant players around us, and we know they've already got their eyes on us because we sit on mining leases that's high grade, close to surface. And these projects are looking for feed, particularly high grade feed, and we're sitting on significant high grade feed in the area. So we already know that there's what Bright Star are doing, done a deal with Genesis. We know of a number of other companies that are doing deals with mills, toll treating deals with mills. Look, that opportunity is open to us, but at this point we don't want to necessarily go down that path. But we know that path is certainly a very viable opportunity for us, provided we've got the right toll treating deal. But at the moment, we think there's so much unexplored here that we really want to just target that as a starting point.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Just another question here. If we could maybe jump back to the pennyweight point sections. The investor says you had a stunning hit of 14 metres at 15.5 grams at Yundamindra, which was pennyweight point, I think, which caught the market's attention. How far away from that hit was the recent follow-up diamond drilling?
Yeah, really good question. I'm glad you raised this point because when we did our expansion program in December, we drilled north of that hole 77, and we hit mineralisation, but we certainly it was only really low detection mineralisation. Hole 77 sits right here, in the yellow. So that was 14 metres at 15 grams a tonne. So it's sort of right on the border of that weathered zone. Our diamond hole, you can see, is directly down, plunged down, dip from that hole 77. So that's obviously really encouraging, really exciting. That 14 at 15 metres, that just might be, it's a significant high grade shoot sitting up there. But it's what we're actually seeing is as we're drilling the fresh rock, we're getting these really consistent, 30 odd metres at 2 to 3 grams a tonne. So when we drilled this, and this was drilled in August, we got these 14 metres at 15 grams a tonne. The obvious next target was to drill north of that. Now we drilled, and you can see that the drill holes here. We hit mineralisation, but it was really low detection mineralisation. But what we actually identified, and we saw it when we were actually drilling, that we could see that it was really fractured and disruption happening there. And it was clear that there was a fault going through there. And if I just quickly jump back to this previous image, you can actually see the fault in the mag right there coming through. And you can see, hole 77 sitting there. So we've actually in the midst of doing getting some more detailed mag over this area, because what the soils and stuff, and I'll quickly flip forward again, is that there's significant evidence that this structure continues to the north, and we're getting a lot more confidence that this is just a disruption and the mineralisation has just been shifted, we think, to the east. And as we drilled out further, we started to get a little bit stronger mineralisation to indicate that it does continue to the north. The other interesting piece, which is not on here, is that there's a number of historical shafts which sit down here. There's actually a significant historical shaft that sits out here to the north. So we actually drilled between hole 77 and a historical shaft, and we hit this sort of, just a depletion fault disruption zone. But we're really confident that mineralisation extends to the north, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that's the case as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, very exciting. There were a couple of questions, Justin, on non-core assets, and I should just quickly cover off on those. So someone asked online, what is the status, or what are the plans for Admiral Bay up in...
Yep. Yeah, Admiral Bay, and we've still got the Admiral Bay, and look, we've made it. Admiral Bay's been in care and maintenance for a number of years. Look, Admiral Bay is a very well-known deposit, very complex deposit. We've had that out to tender to divest that. We came to a conclusion fairly rapidly that it's such a significant deposit, and it's significantly complex, that really needs to be in the hands of a much larger organisation that has funds to actually really put the funds in that to drill it and test it out. So we've had that, and we're working with Argonaut at the moment to try and invest that. We've got a lot of interest, and we do get a lot of interest, particularly from a lot of the big players in the zinc space. So we're continuing to hopefully divest that, and it's a non-core asset. It needs a lot of funds, significantly more than a junior can put into it. So the strategy is to divest that, and hopefully we'll then retain, be it cash or script and something. So we've still got some upside if there is a significant discovery, but the Admiral Bay deposit is 1.2 kilometres below surface, sits between 3 aquifers, and the core temperature where the mineralisation sits is around 70 odd degrees. So it's a really complex deposit, albeit significantly large, and it will get mined at some point, but just needs really deep pockets to test it out.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the modified rigs Kookynie had to get oil rigs to drill that out, I think, back in the 2000s.
Yeah, and that's how it was discovered. Yeah, it is a failed oil and gas reserve. And that's how it was discovered.
And just finally, a quick one. Someone emailed in before the webinar. Can you give us an update on what you're doing with Mount Surprise in Queensland and whether it is of any value?
Yeah, so the Mount Surprise projects, and when Steve came on board and the first month or so that they were here was really just evaluating all our projects, and getting a sense of is there any stuff that we maybe should look to divest and the like. With the Mount Surprise projects, and that's largely copper. It's actually a multi-element prospect. So it's a highly enriched area, and there's a lot of different commodities around that area. We've identified copper, and there's some old historical copper workings on there. We've done a lot of rock chips, and we hit some really high copper anomalism in those rock chips. So it's still, and Steve sort of comes to view that that's actually still a pretty exciting project. Queensland's a little bit different to West Australia in that you have an exploration budget for a number of years. I think it's about 5 years. And once you spend that money, you don't actually have to every year continue to spend the money. So look, while gold's sort of the flavour of the month, and while we're hitting record gold prices, and with 2 really exciting projects, our focus naturally is on Yundamindra and Kookynie. But we've still got there. We've been approached about our Mount Surprise project a number of times, but at the moment we want to hold on to that because there is copper. Copper will come back, and it's early stage exploration. So we want to put more work into that. But at the moment, we just really want to focus on. We've probably got a perfect storm happening at the moment in that gold prices are at record highs. We're sitting in probably one of the most prospective areas in the world for gold. We're surrounded by a lot of really big players, and we've got 2 underexplored, really exciting projects. So it's sort of a bit of a perfect storm. So the focus is on those 2 projects.
Yeah, that's great, and a good way to sort of bring things to a conclusion, Justin, from a fantastic overview there. Just finally for investors, when do you start drilling?
Yeah, so the drill rig, the last I heard is drill rig will be on site end of May, beginning of June. So I suspect we'll be drilling sometime really early June. So like I say, we're getting the camp set up. Everything's ready to go. We've got the rig lined up. And the last I heard, it's probably early June when we bung our first hole.
Fantastic. And then what sort of flow or cadence of assay turnaround could we roughly expect? I'm hearing that turnaround times have improved in the assay labs. What roughly should we be looking out for?
Yeah, they have. And look, we're really conscious of making sure that we get constant news flow as well. So with our drilling, we're sure that, we're trying to ensure that we get assays into the labs as quickly as possible, meaningful assays that then we can interpret and get back out to the market and sort of just have that constant flow of, drilling, getting assays in, getting results back. So we've got this constant news flow. So look, I think turnaround is, once I get to the lab, is around about 3 weeks at the moment, 2 to 3 weeks. But look, we've actually got a lot of stuff in the lab at the moment. We've got a lot of soils and rock chips and stuff at the moment. So we've actually got a fair bit of news flow that is going to already continue to keep flowing. And we need to do that work, so that helps prioritise where we're going to drill these new priority targets. But obviously with 2 projects going as well, it sort of will increase the amount of news flow and consistency of news flow. So once we get our first lot of assays in, and we won't be drilling 3,000 meters to get assays in. We'll be drilling, we'll start getting assays in after the first 1,000 or so meters. A certain number of holes, so we can really start to get the markets, aware of what's happening.
Fantastic. Look, that's I think a good way to wrap it up. So look, thank you very much for coming on this morning, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in for some great questions and great interaction. So Justin, best of luck with it. Hopefully we'll get you back on here soon.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, it's a really exciting time for the company. We hope all investors can come along for the ride. We really think that there's a significant opportunity to unlock the real value of these projects, and obviously will be reflected in shareholder returns. And thank you to Reed Corporate and everyone for hosting this today, and for everyone for tuning in and asking questions.
Thanks, Justin. And just a reminder to everyone that a recording of this will be available later today for anyone that wasn't able to join us live. But there you have it. Arika Resources, definitely a stock to watch in the gold space. 20 mil or sub 20 mil market cap, just raised $5 million off to drill in the next couple of weeks, and lots of news flow to come in one of the best parts of the WA goldfield. So it doesn't get much better than that. So thank you very much for joining us. We will look forward to bringing you our next company in the near future, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.